Welcome to the Astronomical League video sessions. My name is John Goss, former president of the League. This program is one of a series of presentations in conjunction with the League's 75th anniversary. The League was founded on November 15th, 1946, with just under 1,500 members. Today, I've been told very recently that we have just under 21,000 members spread across the United States and international memberships as well. Today we have with us Cindy Krach, who is the administrator coordinator of our Astronomical League Sketching Observing program. She's going to be talking, obviously, about sketching, the ins and outs of the program, some tips on sketching, and what it takes to complete the program. So with that, Cindy, would you like to start saying a few words about sketching?
I'd love to. Thank you, John. Okay. I know a lot of people are put off by the thought of sketching, but I want everybody to understand that this program was not created for artists. The program is for everyone, regardless of your artistic ability. And if you can make a pencil mark and make a smudge with your finger, you have the ability to complete the program. It's that simple. The main focus is not to make artists out of amateur astronomers, but to help slow down the observing process and improve your observing skills. And if you already sketch your observations, it's a chance to hone your skills and maybe try some new techniques and materials. It's also a chance to revisit some old favorites while possibly seeing greater detail. You may even discover a few objects on the list you haven't seen before. That's one thing I love about all the AL programs. There's always something new. A little history about astronomical sketching. Documenting observations isn't anything new. Humans have recorded their observations for millennia. The left image shows a cave painting from France dating back 40,000 years. And archaeologists once thought these paintings represented wild animals, but a 2018 study believes they depict starry constellations, dates, astronomical events, and even a comet strike. Further studies of cave art across Europe show that prehistoric people had a more advanced knowledge of the night sky than we previously thought. They understood some complex concepts, such as equinoxes. The upper right image shows an ink on silk sketch of comet observations from the ancient Chinese dating back to at least 300 BCE. And are some of the most extensive historical comet records in existence. The lower right photo is a carved petroglyph from Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, possibly depicting a total solar eclipse and a coronal mass ejection from the year 1097 CE. Research shows that the sun would have been at near solar maximum at the time of the eclipse, and that's why they think that's possibly a CME. After the invention of the telescope in 1608, sketching astronomical observations increased dramatically. And in 1610, Galileo rushed to publish his 32-page Starry Messenger. This book was filled with sketches of observations made through a crude refracting telescope. Publication was certainly the beginning of Galileo's trouble with the church, which eventually led to his house arrest for the last 8 years of his life. And after COVID, I think we can all appreciate what that must have been like. Though Galileo was not the first to suggest a heliocentric model, his observations of the moons of Jupiter provided further evidence that not everything orbits the Earth. His sketches of the surface of the moon showed it was not a perfect sphere, but riddled by craters. This upset the church that believed that all celestial bodies were perfect because they were created by God. And I like to think of all the commotion Galileo must have created with his small telescope. John Herschel made very accurate deep sky sketches using his 20-foot reflector with an 18-inch speculum mirror. He used a method of triangulation to sketch features as well as calipers and grids to make precise measurements. The sketch shown here is his preliminary sketch of M8, the Lagoon Nebula, from 1847. This sketch took him months of observation to complete and shows remarkable detail and accuracy when compared to photographs of the same objects today. Can you imagine how difficult it must have been to sketch while observing through a 20-foot focal length scope? Oh no, I dropped my pencil. Astronomical sketching. Astronomical sketching was not without inaccuracy and bias. Since the eye of no two observers is the same object often looked very different in the hands of different astronomers. And I really like this slide, courtesy of Howard Bannock from an excellent talk he gave in 2015 on astronomical drawing. The slide shows 6 19th century astronomers and their sketches of M1, the Crab Nebula. I think you can appreciate that there's a bit of variation in what each astronomer observed. Some of the differences can be explained by remembering they had different educational backgrounds, equipment, locations, eyesight, and different recording methods. It's also important to note that observations were often used to support hypotheses, which further influenced what was recorded. The end of the 19th century, the age of astrophotography was in full swing, and the advent of deep sky imaging introduced further bias into sketching. Today, beautiful long exposure photographs influence what we expect to see when we look through our telescopes. The vast majority of astronomical discoveries over the past century are due in large part to astronomical imaging. But this in no way lessens the importance of scientific discoveries made by astronomers in earlier times using the tools they had at hand. So why sketch? While astrophotographs may bring out the beauty and detail of an object, they don't show what you actually observed at the eyepiece. Your sketch will provide a record of what you actually observed with your telescope and your conditions. Sketching requires only paper, a pencil, and a few other inexpensive items. Sketching can provide a permanent record of your observations. Details that may be put into words can also be illustrated on paper. A sketch can bring back vivid memories of an observation in a way written words may not. And there is a feeling of accomplishment when you sketch your observations. You may also surprise yourself that over time, your ability to record what you see improves. There's a sense of great satisfaction and a personal connection to the universe when sketching at the eyepiece. When you sketch an object, you make it your own observation, unlike anyone else's. And maybe most importantly, rather than flying through an observing list, sketching does take time. It requires you to slow down long enough to record what is being viewed. And as a result, you will develop improved observing skills and see finer details. Imagine a blade of grass. You look at it and move on. Now look at that same blade of grass for, say, 5 minutes. You'll notice more details, such as the shape of the blade, subtle colors and tonal qualities, and its structure. But who cares about grass? The point is that you see deeper details when you observe and sketch astronomical objects and can record more information. Once you sketch something, you often remember it when you see it again. A little about why the program was created. While completing other AL programs that involve sketching, I appreciated how it made me a better observer. My early sketches were simple and quick, and many of them today still are, but I was interested in learning more about sketching at the eyepiece. So I joined a couple of online astro sketching forums. And seeing other sketches, I realized I could show more details if I took more time. So after a lot of practice, my eyepiece sketching skills did improve. And along with that, my observing skills. The sketch of M35 on the left is one of the first sketches I did in 2010. And the one on the right is from 2014. The point is, the more time I took to observe, the more I could see. And I began to realize how an actual sketching program could benefit the excellent AstroLeague lineup of programs. So in 2014, I reached out to my local astronomy group, the Haleakala Amateur Astronomers of Maui, for help with putting the program together. The list we created contains 114 objects of which only 75 are required to complete the program. There are a wide variety of objects to choose from, such as open clusters, galaxies, globulars, as well as planets, lunar features, and other phenomena. Sketches will be mostly from your telescope, but some can be binocular or even naked eye, depending on the object and the details to be recorded. If you're new to sketching, you may want to start with simpler objects. The last column of the object list categorizes the sketching difficulty as level 1, simple, to level 3, complex. And submitted sketches must be from direct observation, not sketched from a photograph. However, practicing from photos can help build your skills and give you a little confidence. And your completed work can be evaluated by your local Alcor or sent to me by email or Dropbox, as well as postal mailing me a copy, not the original, a copy of your work. So what do you need to get started? Well, good news, you won't need to record on rocks like our ancestors. All you really need is pencil, an eraser, and some paper. But here are some other useful sketching items. And this list appears on the Sketching Observing webpage, and I'll go into a little more detail in the next few slides. For paper, I like templates with an area to write about the observation and record other details, but you can make sketches on plain printer paper or in a notebook. And if you're not using a template, a minimum of area of 3 inches is recommended, but it just needs to be large enough to show the smallest details you observe. You may want to try some black paper with white implements. Some people actually prefer it as a more natural presentation of their observations. I personally like this method for doing lunar sketches. And an oversized clipboard with a Velcroed pencil is a great tip. I've misplaced many a pencil in the dark. Red lights are needed to see your work. Rubber band to help keep your paper from blowing around if you're using a clipboard. Okay, again, you can do everything you need to sketch with a number 2 pencil, but these are just some other things that are useful to have if you want to step up your game. You can get a set of different hardness pencils inexpensively on Amazon or any office supply store. I also like General's carbon sketch pencils for very dark marks. I keep a small chunk of charcoal for objects like galaxies, nebulosity, and globular clusters. And I like old-fashioned pencil end erasers because they have an edge. I also like erasers in a dispensing pencil, like the one on the right, and both are great for fine detail. The kneaded gummy erasers can be made into any shape, and they're just plain fun to play with. For blending, you can use your finger, cotton swab, soft cloth, or a blending tortillon, which is a tightly rolled paper that comes to a point and is available at art supply stores. You can also use a soft bristle brush to apply charcoal in a more controlled way. The brush shown here is just a cheap makeup brush I borrowed from my daughter's makeup kit. And yes, I will buy her another. And lastly, tracking is helpful for higher mag objects, but is not required. Here I'm just showing stars and open clusters, and I'm using a number of different hardness pencils and different pressures to get the right magnitudes. Putting in the brighter stars first and then the fainter, and I'm twirling the pencil a little bit to get rounder stars. And here I'm using a tortillon to smudge the stars so the edges don't look as sharp, giving them a little softer and more realistic appearance. And you can also use the tortillon to place fainter stars. And if the cluster has some nebulosity, I use my finger to dip it into some charcoal I've laid down on scratch paper. But you can also apply it with cloth or a soft brush. And I use my finger here to blend the charcoal. I use all these techniques for creating bright nebula. If you do need to erase over the nebulosity, it creates sharp edges. Just smooth over these with your finger. And for galaxies, I again lay down some charcoal with my finger to create the shape of the galaxy and blending to taper the edges. Here I'm using the tortillon to add some brighter areas and remembering that you're working inversely here. So you're now sketching in your brighter area with the darker charcoal. Then using your eraser, you can create a dark lane as one is present and add in any field stars. And I'm going to use a soft brush to create the globular cluster. Again, using that laid down charcoal. You can use your fingers or a soft cloth as well, but fingers sometimes make globular clusters look like fingerprints. I lightly apply the charcoal to the paper and then go back and make the edges fainter, going back to deepen the core. And many globulars have kind of a mottled looking appearance. So I'm going to use I have too much fun with those erasers. I'm going to go back in and just remove some of the charcoal. Then I'm going to blend a little with my finger before I start adding in some field stars, starting with the brighter, going to the fainter. And then if I'm seeing a lot of resolved stars, I use a stippling pattern with a pencil to make it look more like a dense cluster. And I then blend a little with my finger to give a more unfocused appearance. And that's it, voila. If you want to do more with your sketch, you can take a photo or scan them and use photo editing software to invert from white to black, which gives it an eyepiece appearance. And I've listed a couple of resources here, but there are many available. And Photoscape is free and simple to use for PC, and that's what I normally use. And there is a wealth of information about sketching listed on the AL Sketching website page. I highly recommend checking these out, as well as looking around in sketching forums like Cloudy Nights. And it may help to practice some of these techniques before getting out to sketch. Okay, I'm now sitting at the eyepiece and I've located the object I want to sketch. The first thing I do is to find my cardinal directions. And this is important to orient the sketch, but also if you want to compare your sketch to a photographic image or to another sketch later on. And this is also useful to confirm you've sketched the right object, as we talked about before. Place your object in the center of your field of view, turning off tracking if you're using it, and watch to see where the object drifts. The place the object exits is west. And just mark this on your paper. Now you need to determine the other directions. And if you have a telescope with an even number of reflections, a reflector or a refractor without a diagonal, north will be counterclockwise 90 degrees. If you have a refractor with a diagonal, an SCT or MAC, north will be clockwise 90 degrees. Mark these on your sketch. I then spent some time observing the object before starting the sketch. And here I'm showing a fictitious eyepiece view on the left and my red light illuminated sketch pad on the right. One downside to sketching is that you will lose some of your dark adaptation, even when using a red light. So having a general idea of the object before you begin is helpful. And while looking in the eyepiece, imagine a grid lying over the field corresponding to your cardinal directions. This will help orient your sketch. And think about where light and dark areas are, how concentrated a cluster is, where the brightest stars are, and star patterns. Our eyes are very good at picking out patterns. And on your sketch, your imagined grid will help fine-tune where objects and stars are located. Lightly sketch the positions of the brighter and then fainter stars, and you can go back and darken your stars and objects later when you're satisfied with their placement. You don't need to record every star. That's one thing that can make sketching feel overwhelming, all those stars. Just record the stars that are most prominent or have specific patterns that help define the field. And after I'm satisfied with the placement, I go back to my main object and spend more time picking out further details like fainter stars, deepening a core, or adding nebulosity. And be sure to record the time, conditions, and what the object is. I was once so immersed in a sketch that I completely forgot to record what I was sketching. So I recommend you do this first. And after my evening is finished, I like to go over my sketches and remove any stray marks and fix star tails. But I don't recommend adding more details if you didn't see it at the scope. And it's interesting to see what you may have missed, but it's your observation. Don't change it. Above all else, remember, it's not a work of art, it's your observation, so have fun with it.
I can jump in, John?
Yes, please, go right ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add there's another free photo processing program called GIMP, which is also excellent for use in inverting the field and so forth that you might try. Also, in doing globular clusters, I found, I love your technique of smudging first and then adding stars. And one technique I found is that if you draw the stars in a globular cluster in lines across the center, you'll end up with the flares that you want and the more dense concentration of stars in the center where they cross more often. It's a very good technique that produces really good images of globulars. Also, turning off tracking can be a problem if you do it too often because you will lose right ascension alignment on your telescope. So what I do is lock one of the axes and swing the other axis north, let's say, to determine the cardinal position. And from that, I can determine the rest. And finally, one thing I found that works well is the sketchbook that you showed in one of your slides. They have a hard back on them. It sits in your lap nicely, have a red light around your neck, and you can sketch right at the eyepiece very effectively.
I have a question for you on, do you ever go back the following night and add to your original sketch?
I have, if it's a really complex thing that I'm sketching, like for the Orion Nebula, I've done that before, like over a period of 2 or 3 days, just gone back to the original thing just to see if I could see more detail.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck, do you do that?
I have gone back. Normally, I just resketch if I do it again. And one thing I also wanted to add is I use a lot of coding. When I'm observing really faint galaxies, pursuing these art programs, Herschel 2 and so forth, I find it's very useful in making the sketch at the eyepiece to record things like the estimated magnitude of a star near the edge of the halo, or much brighter nucleus, or slightly brighter nucleus, or tapered, a diamond-shaped tapered image. And I use these codes plus codes for the brightness in order to remember to record the sketch properly when I do it, because sometimes you can't tell from some very small galaxy what your sketch is revealing. So the coding helps a lot. When I was in 9th grade or 8th grade, and I was pursuing a program that the League had at the time called the Advanced Junior Certificate, which required observation and sketching of all 110 Messier objects. And these are just some samples of the lead pencil smudge diagrams that I made of those objects then. And it got me started in a good habit. Actually, some of these were made before I was 12 years old. And it got me started logging all observations. And I have logbooks that contain well over, there are 300-page logbooks, each of these, and they contain all my observations back to the time I was 12 years old. The first one recorded is in March of 1960. One thing I use these for, of course, is to record the observation data. That is who I was with, funny things that happened, problems that need solving, temperature, humidity, seeing conditions, location, and so forth. And because I got in this habit of pursuing the advanced junior certificate, I started sketching everything I observed for my entire life. And I'm just going to show you some examples. I've kind of darkened these so that they show up a little bit better. Here's some multiple star work that I did for the multiple star program as an example. Here's some old sketching I did using ballpoint pen. They used to make ballpoint pens that smudged very easily, so you could use your finger to smudge out galaxies and record those. Here's another one that was done with ballpoint pen, recording the Crescent Nebula. Here's one with a little bit of detail of a globular cluster. Here's some solar sketches, H-alpha sketches that I did back when I had a Lumicon filter many years ago. Here was an observation made with a 20-inch of Nereid, the moon of Neptune, which Nereid is the little dot buried in the halo around Neptune. And then I started getting into art pencils later on, and these are some of the brighter objects, so you can get an idea of what you can do with art pencils. Now, I kind of like the blue. Here's one of a segment of the Veil Nebula that gives you an idea of what the blue looks like. I think it's very effective for making sketches. This was just a quick sketch of M42, not a good one at all, but it shows you something that you can do with the blue pencil. This was in pursuit of the Southern Art Program, just a small oval galaxy that I recorded there. You can do planetary diagrams here as well. And there was a transit going on of Callisto at this particular time. And again, some galaxy sketches. And this was IC 1805, a nebula in Cassiopeia, the dark and some lighter areas, which is easy to do with the art pencils. And this was a complete composite of observations of the Fornax cluster. And what I did is I made basically 6 different sketches and then later combined them so that you have a view of the entire Fornax cluster as seen through the Dobbs we were using that night, or 12-inch SETs. And this is just a general layout of my observing logs. Everything I observe, I sketch, unless it's something I'm observing for the umpteenth time, in which case I might simply record no record or make some comment. But for everything new I observe, I try to put something down like this. So I'll stop sharing and just say that one of the benefits of sketching, you can't photograph the entire sky. You can't photograph 3,000 objects, which is, I think, what I've observed in pursuit of observing programs in the league. But you can record a record of what you remembered seeing. And when I look back at these diagrams, I remember the fields. I had to observe the object, and in order to record all of this, you have to be a critical observer. You start noticing things you don't expect. And I'll give you one example of something that happened. I was pursuing I think it was back when I did the Herschel 2 catalog. And I was observing an NGC object, the galaxy in Pisces. And I found it readily. And as I was looking at the field, I noticed a little smudge over on the right side of the field. Now, I happened to have the guide with me, so I looked it up and it said, yes, look for NGC such and such in the same field. And as I sat down to sketch it, I was jiggling the field a little bit to gain a little bit of averted vision benefit. I noticed a little tiny smudge in between the two that was moving. I had no reason to believe it was there from anything I read, so I sketched it in. And I went home and took the sketch and compared it with a photograph and found out that, yes, there's a little elliptical galaxy dead in between the two that was listed as magnitude 16.0. Now, this is a 12-inch telescope. Now, actually, that was the blue magnitude. I think the visual magnitude of it was 14.7, but that's still a reach for a 12-inch in the skies, Bortle 2-3 skies that I had. So the benefits of sketching are enormous. It's a diary of your observation. It's a memory, and it's something you can compare with photographs later if you're need to identify what you observe. Sometimes you make mistakes. You're in Virgo, Leo, coma, and you sketch galaxies thinking it's one thing, and maybe you're mistaken. When you go to the photograph, you can correct that in your records. So sketching is a fantastic way, I think, to pursue observing and to become a better observer.
Yeah,
Can I add, Chuck, to that? That's where cardinal directions are great, because you've got your sketch oriented, and then if you're not sure, especially if you're you're just star hopping, you can go back and see, yeah, that's where those stars are, and yes, that is the object. And I've had that happen to me before too, where I just wasn't sure, and when I've gone back, oh gee, I didn't sketch the right object, so go back to it again.
In my early observations, I did not do cardinal directions in every sketch, and I do now. The observing programs en route to gold required it in some cases, and so I got in the habit of doing it many years ago. Some of the sketches I showed you here were from back in the 90s, and I wasn't doing it quite as regularly, but I have seen the benefit of that and do it all the time now. So absolutely.
I think a lot of us have the same feelings that you have had with this, Chuck. Like you, I remember looking at my notes that I took when I was in 11th grade. And I looked at them recently, and yes, I could kind of still get the same feeling I had. And I remember those nights at 11:45 p.m. jotting down all those notes, thinking, well, I really wasn't thinking how important it was, but I thought, I might be looking at this in a few years from now. Well, it's been a few years, and yeah, it does bring back memories. It gives you a sense of continuity on how you've progressed in the hobby. So thank you for.
Yeah, same here. You'll be, looking at, and you see it again, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember sketching that before. I remember seeing that before, and so it triggers something in your memory. The visual part of it definitely cements things in your memory.
I want to thank Marie Lott for joining in. It's nice seeing you again, Marie, and congratulations on your new position as the National Observing Coordinator, Director, Administrator, whatever the full title is. But these programs have gotten so big, or at least the number of them have gotten so big. It takes a lot of people to keep up with them, to administer them, to make sure things are going smoothly. And so we have Al and Maynard and Aaron, of course, Marie and Cliff Mygat, who is in Washington State. So there are a lot of people needed for this, and I'm glad that Marie has stepped in, because I have come across her observing prowess over the years, and it's good. So she's.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you allowing me to join you. So, and I must say I'm enjoying the program much more than I thought I would. It really did sort of broaden my horizons to have a nice full notebook of a lot of sketches that I otherwise would probably have just drifted off into the fuzziness of my memory. But now, like you say, I've got those sketches and I can go back and remember, oh my gosh, the frost was building up on the scope that night, or, or, oh, look, here's one of the moths smashed into my notebook, or the mosquitoes that were bothering me. They're actually here on my logbook, as I turn the page. So it has been of great value to me. So.
I like sketching globular clusters, and I've noticed, and I noticed on yours, when you inverted it, it seemed to give a three-dimensional appearance. And I have come across that on many of my sketches, and I just think it looks really cool, because I didn't intend on it to be that way, but it happens. And another thing I just wanted to bring out is that when you're sketching in your mind, you kind of have to keep a few steps ahead of yourself. You always have to realize what this is going to actually look like, especially if you invert it. If you end up inverting it, what's light is really going to be dark, and vice versa. And it's just a good mental exercise, I think, and it helps you really realize all the detail there. So that's great. Sketching does make you slow down, and it does make you see things that you normally wouldn't notice in the first place.
And you mentioned about inverting, but that's one of the things I like about the black paper with the white charcoal or white pencils is your brain doesn't have to do that flip. You're just really putting down what you're seeing. And I really like using that. I found a couple of notebooks that are black notebooks, but I have ended up making my own, just getting a bunch of black paper and punching holes and putting it in a folder. But it's fun to work with, and your brain doesn't have to do that extra flip process.
Great. Well, thank you, Cindy, for taking your time today to tell us a little bit about this very valuable, fascinating, interesting skill and activity to do with the eyepiece. It's something that we could all do. And as I was saying earlier today, that when I look back at my notes from so long ago, I did attempt some rather lame sketches, but it does bring back memories, and it kind of gives me a real sense of accomplishment and growth from where I was to where I am, I guess. But it's a good thing to do.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity to showcase the program.
Excellent. Well, it was excellent. I think a lot of people are going to get something out of this. We have a number of programs posted on YouTube about various observing categories, objects, and so on. We have stuff on galaxies, lots of different types of galaxies. We have another one coming on about solar observing. So please check out the Astronomical League's YouTube channel, and you'll find a lot of these different programs. So with that, I want to thank all our visitors today. Chuck Allen, our Astronomical League Vice President, Maynard Pittendray, our Executive Secretary, Marie Lott, who is one of our Observing Program Administrators, and Al Lamperti, another Program Administrator. Thank you all for joining in with this. Thank you, Cindy, for taking your time and putting this together and sharing it with us. So in that, we'll say goodnight. Have a good time sketching.